Today we are going to go over a Dynasty League. Tips, tricks, how to be in one. What is a Dynasty League? So Dynasty Leagues, this is typically my favorite way to play fantasy football.
I love Dynasty.
Mm-hmm. And it's because it's more, it just feels better.
Feels like you really just own the team.
Yeah, because in a seasonal league, you just kind of take some guys and either right or you're wrong, and it's, woo. But a Dynasty, you're grooming it like it's your baby.
And you've actually got to do some planning in a Dynasty League.
Because your decisions affect you for a long period of time.
Yes.
And if you have a close set of friends who play football or like football or, play fantasy or whatever, this is the way you should be playing. Because this is the ultimate, I'm better than you. Because if you dominate a person, they either need to be real good or it's a long haul back into fandom. Because it's a balance. And however you construct your roster is how this balance weighs. You want to win right now, or if you want to win in the future. The good teams can balance this to both. And a lot of people have to consistently nail, I like that guy, I like this guy, right? And it's hard to do. So you're going to win some, you're going to lose some, but the ones you win just feel so good because it's like, I got that guy for free. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it's just ultimately rewarding. The most important thing in a Dynasty League is the startup and that first draft. Because after that first draft, it's pretty straightforward. It's like a rookie style draft, and you're playing, you get draft picks and you can, trade them or whatnot. But that first draft, that's the bulk of your team. Now, the separator between a Dynasty League and a Standard League was inevitable because there was a Keeper League that came out of a Standard League. And that's where it's like, oh, well, you keep a couple guys. Well, Dynasty League is you keep your team. You drop a couple guys. So, very important to just know football and just trust your eyes. So how do you guys approach the draft in a Dynasty League?
There's a lot of different ways you can approach it. I think trading back in the first round is very viable for you, depending on where you're at. If you're in the first 4 or 5 picks, maybe not. But after that, if you can get, say, a second and a third and maybe a 7th or something, I would take that for a first. Because you're getting 2 starters for the one. Yeah, he could be elite. But depending on where you're at, you should know that. So I would take the 2 starters, and the 7th, it might be late, but that's still a starter on your team or a high upside guy. I think that's a viable option.
Yeah, I think people hear 7th, and it sounds bad. But a 7th in a Dynasty League...
In a startup
league.
That's big. That's a starter on your team.
That's a starter on your team. So... Now, the values of these types of trades typically don't happen the first year unless the team or the people involved are experienced in understanding the value. Because most people will go from a standard to a dynasty, and that transition is dramatic. And it's going to take a year or 2 for people to actually adjust and understand the relevance. So it's usually difficult in a startup dynasty league to get a trade like that, but I concur the opposite way. You see, if I could have, if we were doing a dynasty startup, and I could get the 1st and 3rd overall picks, to me, I can solidify something that nobody else will have ever in that league, and that's 2 high-demand, young, productive running backs. Right? That's how I would aim toward. But it would cost you. It's like, oh, yeah, that's not fair, right? Well, it kind of is, because the rest of your team is going to be like flex players. And you're going to have to be able to nail those low-end people, because it's going to cost you your 2nd, your 3rd, your 4th, your 5th. It's going to cost you a lot to go up there. Yeah. There's a lot of charts. There's a lot of websites for valuations and what it should cost to do this or that. If you bring that up in the beginning of the league, then a lot of people can get familiar with it, and you can use that. But approaching the draft specifically is a fanatic type of look at football. This is not, I'm going to rank my guys. No, because strength of schedule don't matter. Bye weeks don't matter. Because this is a guy you're going to have for 3 years. Right? So you're looking at what type of player is he in? What system is he in? Do you believe that coach is going to be there next year? Do you think that quarterback's going to be there? You have to consider a lot of things. And if you love football, that's your cup of tea. I think in a dynasty, you're just always in the future state of mind. And if you can consistently get in front of curves, you're going to benefit. Now in dynasty, it's nothing like the standard league, in my opinion.
Nope. In dynasty, youth rules more than age, because somebody's not going to want to go in there and draft a Julio Jones when they can get a Chase Claypool, because now you got that long term.
Right.
You got that. That's the kind of stuff that Jay was just talking about. When you go into your initial draft, how do you want to approach it? Now, if you want to do a win now, go for the older guys. Take a shot at them. A couple years down the road, though, your team's going to be in trouble. Yeah.
Right.
Because you did not go for that youth. Whereas somebody else is going to leapfrog you and start taking advantage of that league.
Yeah, and that's simple economics. I mean, you could buy a car now with resaleability, right? And it's worth more because you can resell it. Julio Jones, you're using now, and he's going to have just an end. Just a drop off where it's worth nothing, right? So you don't want to be the guy holding that when that happens, because there's going to be a sharp decline, and this has been proven over time. You know, Julio Jones, he'll be awesome, and then he'll just fall off a cliff. Look at AJ Green. Look at a lot of examples. So it's kind of a game. Am I doing good? Am I winning now? I want to win now. Dynasty leagues usually have trophies because you get that bragging right. You know, whether you put your name on it, whether you have a whole year of just jumping around like I won. And sometimes sucking for 3 or 4 years after that win is worth it, especially if they're close friends. In a dynasty, when we talk about injuries, it's different. It's different because you could hold a guy for years for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's certain things in dynasties that help this. You know, like injury reserve, things like that. But this is a guy that's just sitting on your roster where you can't utilize taking a shot on a guy because you have to reserve it here. And you typically hold people a lot longer. So cutting in a dynasty league, for me, is hard. It's the hardest thing because I believe in every one of those guys.
Yeah, especially that end of the year cuts. Somebody's got to go, and right. It is a tough decision because then you're looking at like, okay, do I want to keep these younger guys that I've got who have the potential? Do I maybe want to cut these older guys? But you kind of feel stingy too because you don't want nobody else around you to have. So it gets rough.
Right.
Yeah, and it's a lot harder to replace people too, because usually in dynasties you have deeper rosters, so you can't just go find a guy off the waiver.
Right. So yeah, it's the waiver pool is a lot thinner, which means, and I'm already an aggressive waiver pool guy. So if there's a guy out there that I would want on my team, there might be 2 guys the whole season. And those are the 2 guys I put everything I got for. Mm-hmm. So if you have fab money, maybe it's week 2, I'm spending $40 on that first guy. Immediately take a shot on him. And then that last 60, that's going to be the next guy. I'm taking 2 shots because if I want him, I'm getting him. Right?
Yeah, if you can get him, that's huge, especially if he hits, because then now you're in playoff contention and getting a championship because you just got a free guy.
Yeah. I mean, You can say examples like this all day, like Robinson or Gaskin of this last season.
Yeah.
Those are both free agency people, and those that aggressively went and got them had good players. I mean, Gaskin got hurt, but in the future, if you're a Dynasty League, that's a guy you want.
Yeah.
Now, Dynasty is cool because trading is not only ubiquitous, it is a must. Everybody has to trade. If you don't, it's going to hurt you. And the reason is every year things change. Players move, news comes out, Odell throws a helmet, something happens, right? And values are all over the place. And if you can constantly jump off high peaks and jump low valleys that are coming up, you're just going to gain so much value that you have arsenal to trade with. And in a Dynasty League, that arsenal can get you anybody you want. In a seasonal league, there's literally a 0% chance you can go get like a Derrick Henry when he's killing it. Mm-hmm. In a Dynasty League, you can. You can if you have the arsenal for it. In Dynasty, though, depth is very important.
Yes.
So, trading in a Dynasty League is much different. And again, there's websites, there's charts and stuff for evaluations.
And I wouldn't rely on any just one thing or one chart. It's mainly just kind of market value what it is, but a player is only really worth what the people in your league value them at. Is if you got Michael Thomas, and you say, hey, people are getting 3 first-round picks for him in other leagues, but your league only says, hey, I'll give you a first, and that's what he's worth.
Yeah, there's some truth to that as well. Which leads me to my next point. If you don't believe in a trade in a seasonal league, then I understand the anger for collusion. I understand being upset because they sold out and won that league because of a trade because somebody didn't think it through. In a Dynasty League, that's not at all what happens, because there's a lot of different scenarios where your perception of a player is different among everybody, and you might be wrong and you might be right. And if you look in the long haul, you'll see some people benefit that you thought got way too little, and you're like, oh man, it's a terrible trade, right? So in Dynasty Leagues, it's a little more freedom, and usually if you're in a Dynasty League, you're with a close group of people. You're not with random guys across the world, right? You're with usually some friends, and it's less, I think they're cheating, and more, oh, you're an idiot. which is what it is. But in a Dynasty League, trading is something that's all the time. I mean, a month after the Super Bowl, trades will go on in that league. That Dynasty League doesn't stop.
And that's the most important time, I think. From right now until free agency, I think this is the most important time to trade if you're going to do it. Because the values aren't going to change. You know what they are. And you just got to think ahead. What do you think is going to happen next year? And if you can hit on that right now, you can get guys pretty cheap that just turn out to hit.
Especially when you start hearing the rumors like, oh, this receiver is in his last year of his contract. You might not see him in his uniform next year. A player switching teams ain't always a good thing. So if you got a chance to dump that player off now while his value is high enough, you can get some value out of it, maybe another draft pick out of it, jump on it. Take advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah, no, AA made a really good point. In the off season is when everybody's at their actual value. So during the season, you have, injuries, matchups, all kinds of things that kind of make the value move, right? Whether it's, your specific situation, right? You have to worry about the game you're playing next week. But in the off season, you can make a move and have a weakness for a couple weeks until you can get what you want. Like maybe you have a draft pick you're going to go after or something. So you have flexibility and you can get a more steady value across the board. Now, Joe was talking about, the rumors and stuff. Well, like an example of this is like Tyreek Hill. I mean, that guy was an amazing wide receiver. Fell off a cliff because of just stuff that happened, and he was getting sold across everything. And the ones who bought him for cheap. And the season came out, and he's just fine. So it's knowledge, it's paying attention, it's keeping football alive 365 days a year. And if that's you, Dynasty is where you need to be.
But not everyone turns out to be a Tyreek Hill. You get a few that turns out to be an Emmanuel Sanders. You know, he's in Denver, he's killing it there, looks good, goes to New Orleans, becomes a shadow. That's the risk, though, you take when you're in a Dynasty League.
Yeah, so you got to do your due diligence, knowing like if he's going to be a good fit, if you think he's going to leave that system, if you know, all those things considered.
I would also say don't be afraid to buy high on a player. Now, I don't say like an elite player, you know, like a McCaffrey or a Saquon. You know what their ceiling is, and that's what it is. They're not really going to go any higher. I'm talking about guys like right now, Cam Akers. Last week in the divisional round, he killed it. He didn't really get to play a lot of the season. He got hurt. They had a three-headed backfield, but he's higher than he's ever been right now, and you shouldn't be afraid to buy him unless you really don't believe in him. But you have to take shots like that because his ceiling could be so much more than what it is right now.
Right, yeah. So when you're saying don't be afraid to buy high on a player, it's buy high at his current value. So understanding what somebody's worth and then what's high and what's low for that player is really important. Because even if you don't need him, if you can get him for cheap, then you should get him for cheap. Cam Akers, buying high in Cam Akers right now.
Could be buying cheap next year.
Yeah, so you got to keep that in mind. Like a big part of the Dynasty League is your ability to know football and read the future. Like understand this guy's gonna be good. Why? You have to know why. You can't just say, "Oh, I like that guy," right? That's gonna get you in trouble. But it didn't take long for the general consensus to say, "Oh, this guy's good," right? But there's a period of time where people aren't sure. And you have to be sure. And don't be afraid to pay for that. Like Cam Akers high right now would be like what? A first round pick and like a fourth string starter?
A low end, not a starter, like a bench guy, you know, a depth piece. But yeah, something like that, mid-round first and a depth piece, something like that.
Right, and that would be buying high on him.
Yeah.
And that's funny because, you know, he's probably taken last year in a rookie-only draft about there.
Yeah.
So his value hasn't really increased from when you first got him, but it dropped so low that now it's just getting back up to that value. He's a young kid, bright future. Yeah, I mean, if paying high on him is super cheap.
And being patient with your players is also key in Dynasty. Especially if you got young players that, you know, you might have 3 years to where you don't make the playoffs, you don't make the playoffs. You get frustrated, you're trying to sell. Don't. Hold on to these good players that are emerging up. The Akers, the Claypools, these young guys that are going to come up. Because then, once they all peak, you got them all on your team. You've got a 4 or 5 year stretch there where you're dominating. Everybody's talking crap about you.
That's how you build a dynasty.
That's how you build
dynasty.
That's how you build a dynasty.
Exactly.
And sometimes it takes time. And if you give up too early, you might have got a guy for cheap, then sold him for cheap after holding him for a year and a half, and then he breaks it. And you just had this guy for a year and a half, didn't benefit at all on him. You were right, and now you don't own him. So you can't just give up. If you believe in something, stand by it. Because the typical player can't come from a rookie and be elite in 1 year. It just doesn't happen. But, you know, eventually they break it. So just know your shit and believe in yourself. Because a lot of these media people and a lot of your friends, right, they're all biased, including you. But it's so good when you're right. It's so good when you're right. You want to be benefiting from being right. Don't be like, oh man, I believe in Chase Claypool. I'll give you a second for him. Okay. And then that guy gets him, and then he blows up, and you're like, oh, I had him, and I called it.
That's the worst.
That's the worst.
Yeah.
Or if you think you're going to get depth let's say you trade Ezekiel Elliott for, at the time, a Tariq Cohen and David Johnson and a second-round pick. Obviously, Zeke shined. The rest of it flushed down the toilet. You gotta take the good with the bad. Don't always assume that the value you're getting is going to be amazing. You just never know what the future holds. Use your best judgment on it.
Yeah. And I will say one more tip. I know it's relevant in seasonal leagues and whatnot to have backups to your players, but in a dynasty, that's really important.
Yeah.
Not only to continue production like in seasonal where you want to win the next week and next week, but having the backups in a system that works, like let's say the Titans. No, Titans are bags.
It's mainly for running backs.
It's for anybody that fits the system because the guy behind him is a younger version of a person who fits the system. And when this guy gets traded, retires, leaves the team, you have his replacement who should maybe not have as much production, but will have value, and their value will skyrocket. So even if you don't have that starter, if you have that guy you believe it will be the starter, the second he's named the starter, that's going to be his highest point of value. Now you can sell that guy. It's all about knowing value and waiting for it. So, I don't know. Dynasty's just, there's really two people in the world. Either you play Madden and you play against your buddy, or you play the franchise mode. That's really that simple. I like franchise mode.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I think we covered just about anything. You guys have anything else to add?
Oh,
No, not really.
sound good.
Just good luck to you. Stay patient.
Trust your gut.
Yes.
That's all we got for you today. Like, subscribe. See you in the next one.